When you're in your mid-20s, you really only have three options.
Get married,
Get a master's,
or run a marathon.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Francis.
And welcome to this week's episode of the Zone 2 podcast,
where we explore all there is to learn about supershoes in this week's special. So, Brian, you've worn supershoes.
I have.
I've worn supershoes.
You have.
And you've gone really fast in them.
Yeah, they're noticeably fast.
How would you describe the feeling of running in them?
I think the best way I could describe it is like you're running and somebody is shoving you in the back to like push you forward as you're running.
I think that's probably a good description. It's almost like the shoes want you to go faster.
Yeah, it's almost like it feels naughty to not run fast while wearing super shoes.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because super shoes, I feel like, are always surrounded in a little bit of controversy. And it's almost like an ethical question for some runners when it comes to choosing which shoes they're going to race in, whether or not they choose super shoes, because it's almost like mechanical doping.
I mean, that's the thing with professional athletes is, especially when you're competing at a very high level, anything that you can do to get an advantage, you're going to do. Even if it's a 1% increase in your performance, you're going to find every single way that you can do that. But I think where you're coming from is the controversy around super shoes is at what point is this an unfair advantage, perhaps?
And it also comes down to a purchasing power controversy because super shoes are extremely expensive. A run-of-the-mill pair of super shoes, I say run-of-the-mill because when you look at all these different brands, sometimes you're comparing apples to apples when it comes to their super shoes. They all have similar foams. They all have some sort of rigidity element built into them, whether that's a carbon plate or a carbon rod. And they can run you upwards of $300, if not more.
And something that you've found recently too is while you might be paying a premium for a super shoe like this, it doesn't necessarily give you the same longevity that you might get out of just a standard daily trainer where you can run 500-600 miles easily on just a pair of shoes.
Yeah, they do not last that long. And it's really interesting because in the last 5, maybe 6 years, something extraordinary has been happening in competitive running. It's not just that records are being broken, it's the way they're being broken. We're talking about chunks of time being lopped off, seemingly untouchable world bests. Think Kelvin Kiptum absolutely demolishing the men's marathon record, bringing it down to an incredible 2 hours and 35 seconds in Chicago in 2023. Or Tigst Assefa at the 2023 Berlin Marathon, who didn't just beat the women's world record, she obliterated it by over 2 minutes, finishing in 2 hours and 11 minutes and 53 seconds. And it's not just the marathon, Brian. On the track, we've seen Jakob Ingebrigtsen set the European record for the 1500 and Joshua Cheptegei rewrite the men's 5K and 10K records. Letesenbet Giddy did the same on the women's side for a period of time. Across distances, from 5Ks to half marathons, personal bests are tumbling at an unprecedented rate, not just for elites, but also for dedicated amateurs as well.
So, Francis, the question must be asked, what is the common thread that's weaving together all of these incredible achievements?
That's a great question. So if you look at any photo of an elite runner racing, if you zoom into their feet, you'll probably find the answer. Super shoes. These brightly colored, high-stacked, often carbon-plated marvels of engineering have become ubiquitous with peak performance in foot races. But the meteoric rise of this technology has sparked a whirlwind of questions in the running community, questions that I hope to answer here today. Like, what exactly is the technology that makes these shoes so effective? Why do they cost so much, often coming with a price tag of $250 or more? And the big one, the question every runner wants answered, do they actually make you faster? Or is it all hype?
I'm certainly want to know the answer to that one.
Well, today we're going to do a deep dive to answer these questions. We'll look into the science, explore the economics, and weigh the evidence. But before we get to the cutting edge, let's rewind the clock. To truly appreciate where we are, we need to understand where we've come from. So let's take a jog down memory lane, back to the very beginnings of modern running footwear. So, Brian, you've worn super shoes. Did you ever wonder where they came from? Like, what did the first running shoes actually look like?
I have wondered a little bit, actually. I think one of our fun facts in a previous episode was about Alan Turing, The famous
the famous mathematician who broke the Enigma cipher during World War II.
cipher, who's also a very talented marathon runner. And at one point, I was really curious what he was wearing on his feet, and I was pretty shocked to learn marathon runners of yesteryear, perhaps long before our time, were wearing like loafers to go
Yeah.
running. I would hardly call a loafer super. It might be super fly, but not necessarily super fast.
That's true. And if you look at the shoes of Alan Turing's era and fast forward just a mere 10 years, it's May 6th, 1954, Iffley Road track in Oxford, England.
250 yards to go, and Bannister takes over.
A young medical student named Roger Bannister is about to make history when he breaks the tape, becoming the first human to run a mile in under 4 minutes.
The tape is broken, and so is the record athletes have long been dreaming about.
A monumental accomplishment thought to be impossible. What's he wearing on his feet that gives him such an edge?
I'm going to guess you're going to tell me Supershoes.
Well, the shoes of Bannister's era were pretty rudimentary by today's standards. We're talking about thin, often kangaroo leather uppers stitched to a sole that might have a few carefully placed spikes hammered in by hand. And these spikes were designed for traction on the cinder tracks. But cushioning, arch support, energy return, those concepts didn't really exist. The only concern was to be lightweight and to provide grip.
So, Francis, I have a couple questions here.
Yeah, go for it.
First off, why kangaroo skin?
So kangaroo skin is unique because it could be cut down into very thin slices, but it would also retain its durability at the same time.
Interesting.
So it wouldn't all of a sudden come apart while you were running on it.
How come kangaroo skin's not used anymore?
When it comes to running, it's much more about breathability and practicality. So leather, even though at the time kangaroo skin was considered breathable, compared to a mesh upper that we have access to now, it would be incredibly stifling for one's feet.
So we talked about the kangaroo skin. Why cinder tracks?
So cinder is compacted coal residues, and that was very easy on people's feet because they didn't really have any cushioning to help them while they were running. So if they were running on dirt and there were rocks, that would like destroy their feet. Obviously, we switched from using cinder tracks to using polyurethane tracks. I'm not sure exactly when, but pretty much every track you'll see nowadays is polyurethane, which is a classic red circle that's, quarter mile.
Interesting. So cinder tracks. And why wouldn't cinder be used anymore, especially from added cushioning? And what did it feel like to run on cinder?
Well, runners probably felt every single bump in pebble because they didn't have anything cushioning them. I think the main reason to switch from cinder to polyurethane was really just the traction. If you're running on a sandy-like material, which is what cinder is, you're going to be kicking back a lot of material every single time you run. It also takes a lot of time to prep every single time you race, so you have to groom the track, whereas opposed to polyurethane is just ready to go.
That's interesting.
So for decades, leather and then basic rubber were the mainstays. Imagine running in Sambas or Stan Smiths. Rubber offered better durability and acted as a sort of rudimentary shock absorber for some of the smaller rocks and bumps, and a step up from the leather soles that could become slick or heavy when they got wet. So early running shoe pioneers like the Dassel brothers in Germany, who later founded Adidas and Puma, and Bill Bowerman at the University of Oregon, who co-founded Nike, were constantly tinkering with the design of running shoes. Bowerman famously used his wife's waffle iron to create a new type of rubber outsole, leading to Nike's signature grid-like tread pattern incorporated into a lot of their shoes now. But the real paradigm shift, Brian, in how running shoes felt and performed was actually just around the corner when it came in the form of foam. So the introduction of specialized foam midsoles in the 1970s was the first real revolution in running shoe comfort and protection. And there's really 3 types of foam when it comes to running shoes. First up, we have ethylene vinyl acetate, or EVA. Brooks was one of the first brands to incorporate EVA into their running shoes in 1975 with the Villanova. Suddenly, runners had a material that could not only absorb shock and provide a level of cushioning, but also add a little bit of energy return. EVA foam was created by trapping air bubbles within a plastic compound. It's relatively lightweight. It can be molded into different shapes and densities, and importantly, it was cost effective to produce. It became the industry standard, and for good reason. It made running on hard surfaces more forgiving and likely played a significant role in the road running boom of the 70s and 80s. Runners felt more comfortable on more surfaces, and it allowed them to run further without worry of injury, as the main focus of EVA was cushioning above all else. EVA is kind of like the Swiss Army knife when it comes to material science, and it's used in all sorts of applications, including Crocs, yoga mats, swimming kickboards, flip-flops, ski boots, you name it. But EVA is not perfect. It could compress over time, or the term that they use is packing out, which means that the air cells would get squished and lose their cushioning properties. It was also very sensitive to temperature, so it would get hard when it was cold and it would get very soft when it was hot. But people liked the technology, and the foam stayed pretty much the same all the way up until the 2010s. So if it's not broke, don't fix it.
So EVA through the 2010s, and what happened in the 2010s?
Okay, so fast forward, the year's 2013, and Adidas is making waves in the sneaker industry with the introduction of their newest foam development, thermoplastic polyurethane, or TPU. TPU had been experimented with by other brands, but Adidas was the first to bring it to the masses with their quote-unquote boost technology. TPU itself was actually invented back in 1959 and was used in a lot of medical devices because it was durable and biocompatible, so it could be placed in the body without adverse effects. But it wasn't brought into the shoe market until around 2013, so it's been around for a while. You probably remember walking into your local Dick's Sporting Goods and seeing the Adidas display with the two shoe soles. One would have the Boost Foam TPU, and then one would have the standard EVA, and then you'd have a steel ball that you could drop on them and see the difference in the bounce height. And the reason for this difference in bounce height was that instead of a solid block of foam, Boost consisted of thousands of tiny expanded TPU pellets that were fused together. And the magic of Boost was its remarkable energy return. Even though EVA had slight energy return, it was more so focused on cushioning. Boost, runners described as bouncy or springy. You didn't just sink into the cushioning. You felt like you were getting a little pushback with each step. TPU is also way more durable than EVA, less susceptible to temperature changes, and this really shifted the focus not just to cushioning, but to what the shoe gave back to the runner.
Interesting. So it became less about the runner just being able to tolerate running on surfaces and more about the runner choosing a shoe and choosing a material for their shoe that's going to actually give them an advantage.
Exactly.
So this is a big step then in the shoe industry where this is no longer about, oh, I'm able to run because I have this shoe. Now it's about what shoe are you running in? That's probably the first time that they were actually having that conversation.
Exactly. You're not comparing apples to apples anymore. You're comparing your regular shoes and your performance shoes. So again, the focus was shifting not just to cushioning, but to what the shoe could give you in return. Notably, Dennis Kimetto broke the marathon world record in 2014 while wearing the Adizero Adios Boost, shaving 41 seconds off the previous record. Tigst Assefa also wore the Adizero shoes to break the women's marathon record in 2023, cutting more than 2 minutes from the previous mark.
So TPU is where it's at.
TPU was where it's at, Brian.
Oh.
And that brings us to the current king of the foam world, polyether block amide, or PEBA, often called PEBA. This is the super foam that forms the heart of most modern super shoes. Think of Nike's Zoom X, Saucony's Power Run PB, Asics FF Blast Turbo. PEBA is an elastomer, a polymer with elastic properties, and it boasts a remarkable combination of qualities that makes it kind of magical. One, it's exceptionally lightweight, significantly lighter than EVA or TPU. It's incredibly soft, but crucially, and this is the most important part, it has an extremely high energy return, often cited as being over 80 to 85% responsive. And that means that a huge percentage of the energy you put into the foam on impact is returned to you, helping propel you forward and letting you conserve more energy when your legs are feeling very sore.
So that 80 to 85% energy return that you mentioned, I feel like is really hard to put in perspective without actually experiencing what the shoes feel like on your feet. But if you're wearing a daily trainer when you go out for your runs that's made of either EVA or TPU foam, this is just for reference what the energy return is of these base foams. So if you're wearing a shoe that is pure EVA foam, you're going to see between 50 to 60% energy return from that foam. If you have a TPU, it can be closer to the 70 to 80% range, whereas some PEBA blends can get as high as 95% energy return.
No, it's actually crazy. And a great way to demonstrate this sort of energy return is like if you go into a store, you can take two different shoes. You can take one that has an EVA or a TPU foam, and then you can take one that has a PEBA blend foam. And you can take a steel ball and you drop it on both soles. And you'll see on the PEBA blend shoe that the ball will bounce 95% of the way back to where it was dropped from versus a regular EVA sole shoe, which the ball will only bounce 50% of the way back up to where it was dropped from.
Wow. So you're really getting out of these shoes more than just cushioning.
Oh, by far. And like most exotic materials, PEBA-based foams were initially used in other high-performance industries. Think aerospace before they found their way into running shoes. Nike's work around 2016 to 2017, particularly with their early Vaporfly prototypes, showcased PEBA's game-changing potential. The feeling of running in a PEBA-based shoe is often described as plush, and it's this foam that allows for those massive stack heights that you're starting to see. Think Hoka, think the Nike Alpha Fly, think the Saucony Endorphin Elites, 40 plus millimeters or around there. But at the same time, they're not getting super clunky or heavy because the foam itself is so light. But as much as foam is super, it's only part of the equation. What's the other ingredient?
I'm going to guess you're going to say carbon fiber.
It's the primary building block of life itself, carbon.
Oh, carbon.
Or more specifically, like you said, carbon fiber. The idea of putting a rigid plate in a running shoe isn't brand new. As far back as the 1990s, Reebok first experimented with a carbon fiber bridge in a shoe called the Graphite Road. The aim was to provide some midfoot stability and a touch of responsiveness. Unfortunately, the Graphite Road was way ahead of its time and was never successfully brought to market. Other brands also dabbled in various plate technologies, but these early attempts usually resulted in shoes that were reported to feel overly stiff or even uncomfortable for a lot of runners. The foams of that time might not have been advanced enough to work in harmony with such a rigid element, or perhaps the plate's geometry wasn't quite right. Fast forward to Nike's Breaking 2 project in the mid-2010s. This was a moonshot initiative with a singular, audacious goal.
Some might say outrageous goal.
Some might say impossible goal, Brian, to enable an athlete to run a marathon in under 2 hours. This ambitious quest spurred a massive investment in research and development, and out of this project, the modern Supershoe as we know it was born. The key innovation that emerged alongside the advance of PEBA foam was the inclusion of a full-length curved carbon fiber plate embedded within that foam.
Wow. So we have Eliud Kipchoge and the people behind him to thank for all these incredible shoes.
No, we actually do. That is the reason why that shoe exists.
It was super fascinating to hear Russell's take. And if you're interested in listening to this, you can go back to episode 5, 6,
something around there. It's the one called Getting Technical with Russell Wells.
You can go back to our earlier episode with our friend Russell Wells, who works as an Eakin for Nike. And Russell talked a little bit about how Nike went about developing their elite marathon shoes and how they worked really closely with these elite athletes. And Eliud Kipchoge actually helped to draw up mocks of what he wanted these elite marathon shoes to look like.
Yeah, so not only is he a fantastic runner, apparently he's also an incredible draft artist.
And he's wicked smart.
Yeah, so Nike's philosophy, like we spoke with Russell about, is start with the tip of the spear, start with the elite athlete and let the technology filter its way down to the consumer or the prosumer. So when Nike commercially launched the Zoom Vaporfly 4% in 2017, the running world was turned on its head. The 4% in the name referred to the average improvement in running economy observed in lab tests compared to their previous fastest racing flat. The shoe was launched and the competitive field responded and elite athletes started smashing records. You mentioned Eliud Kipchoge. He ran a 2:01:39 marathon world record in Berlin in 2018, wearing a version of these shoes. And of course, he wore an even more advanced prototype for his historic, though unofficial, hour and 59:42 marathon in Vienna.
So not technically a world record for the marathon, but he was technically the first human being to run a marathon distance in under 2 hours.
It was not a sanctioned marathon.
Yeah.
He was the only participant, and he had a rotating group of pace setters. So in normal marathons, there's no pace setters. In sanctioned marathons, that is.
Yes.
Suddenly, now, everyone's talking about carbon plates this, carbon plates that. Who's going to make the next carbon plated shoe? Where's the next one going to come from? Which carbon plated shoe am I going to buy?
When's Francis going to get a carbon plated shoe?
I already have one.
Yeah, but you didn't when we started the podcast.
That's true. Remember I said that I didn't know if I was ready for that?
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm actually ready for that. And
Now
I
he
bought
actually
them.
can't run without a carbon plate.
It's true. So what's the theory, though?
I don't know.
How does the stiff plate sandwiched in the soft foam actually work? People compare it to a spring, but it's not as simple as that. The current understanding points to a few key mechanisms. Number one, the rocker, or the teeter-totter effect. The plate is usually curved, often quite dramatically, and this geometry combined with its stiffness helps create a smoother and faster transition from foot strike to toe off. So it's kind of hard to picture, but imagine it guiding your foot almost like a gentle rocker, reducing the amount of work that your ankle and your calf muscles have to do to propel you forward. And because of this, it encourages a quicker turnover or a higher steps per minute rate, and therefore a faster pace.
That visual, I think, makes sense. What I think about is sitting in a rocking chair on your front porch. And obviously, you're not running when you're sitting in a rocking chair. But if you lean back in the rocking chair, the weight that's on the front side of that chair is going to push you back forward to the tip of that rocking chair in the front before you tip back. But when you're running, you're not going to tip back. You're going to release from your stride and push off when your foot is fully tipped forward like that rocking chair. So basically, that rocker is just going to guide your foot forward through the step. If you have a rigid plate in the shoe, like a carbon plate, to keep that rocker's shape as you go through the step, that's going to kind of help guide you through that step forward.
And as far as anatomy of a shoe is concerned, you can usually find it around the midfoot area of a shoe. It's sort of like how if you notice on the bottom of a shoe how the toe kind of comes up a little bit and forms like a U shape, that's what the rocker is. And different shoe brands have different rocker geometries. Some might be more dramatic, some might be less dramatic, and you can usually feel the difference. It sometimes feels like the shoe wants to tip you forward.
This has been something that I've noticed too with some newer shoes, or like the New Balance 880, which is my daily trainer that I run in every day. New Balance released a new version of the 880 this year, the V15, which has a little bit more stack height and significantly more rocker compared to the V14, which I still currently run in. I have never felt like I needed more rocker, but it definitely seems like that's the way that the industry is going. And I think we had spoken about this with the Vomero as well, where even if the shoe doesn't have a carbon plate, adding rocker to help guide your foot through the step
makes it feel faster.
It makes it feel faster, and it's a pretty key component to the shoe and how I just think how they're structured. So
that brings us to the second key mechanism for why to have the carbon plate: energy return, guidance, and stabilization. The super foam is incredibly bouncy, but without the plate, a lot of people say that it feels pretty unstable. It's like running on a marshmallow. The plate helps to stabilize that foam and then directs that energy return from the foam into a more focused and forward direction. It's like harnessing the foam's potential energy, if that makes sense.
I mean, if you have a full length plate going the full length of the shoe, it is literally adding directionality to the shoe. So then rather than just stepping on this squishy trampoline of elite foam in the shoe, you have some structure to it that's going to kind of guide it in the direction it's supposed to be going.
Yeah. And the next part is the stiffening and the reduced energy loss. The plate increases the longitudinal bending stiffness of the shoe. So from toe to heel, if you were to take a super shoe and try to bend it, it would be incredibly difficult. And this means that your foot doesn't have to bend as much at the metatarsophalangeal joints, or the joints where your toe meet the main part of your foot. And so by limiting this flexion, the plate can reduce the amount of energy that your body actually expends at that joint, making each toe off more efficient. And this is what runners often report feeling as less fatigue in their lower legs at the late stages of their race.
And this was, so my first time wearing the Alpha Flies, this is something that I really noticed, where I wore Alpha Flies for the last 4 miles of a 16-mile long run. I had a point in my marathon training cycle where I was at that point pushing the longest distance I'd ever run in my life before. And I'm wearing these super shoes. I felt super fast. I felt all the things that you're talking about. But the thing that I think surprised me the most was I looked down at my watch and I was running at my half marathon pace at mile 15 of this long run, going over hills in Newton. Anyone who's ever run in Newton knows. And the fatigue that I think anyone would associate with running at that speed just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. My legs felt like they were on an easy run, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, no, it is crazy. And it's this carefully tuned interplay between the ultra responsive foam and the stiff guiding plate that defines the super shoe. So Vaporfly 4% came out in 2017, and then other brands quickly followed suit. developing their own unique combinations of superfoams and carbon plates, or sometimes carbon-infused rods or other stiffening structures. So, Brian, just to recap, the recipe for a Supershoe that you can do right at home. You can take an advanced, lightweight, high-rebound foam like PEBA, you embed a strategically shaped, stiff carbon plate within it, you optimize the overall geometry, the stack height, the heel-toe drop, the rocker shape, and you make these components work together perfectly, and you wrap it all in a minimalist, breathable upper to keep the weight down. That's it. That's the essence of what makes these shoes good. That and a few $1 million of research and development, marketing, athlete brand deals, manufacturing costs, shipping, which leads me to my next point. Let's talk about the price tag, Brian.
Let's do it.
If you've browsed for a pair of these shoes, or I guess you could call them technological marvels at this point, you'll know that they don't come cheap. We're typically looking at $200, $250, sometimes even $300 or $500 for the latest, most elite models. Like, let's take a look at the Nike Alpha Flies.
So a pair of new Nike Alpha Flies goes for $295.
Okay, so round up to $300 with tax. Pair of New Balance SC Elites, how much are those?
SC Elites, the MSRP price is $250, although right now they're actually on sale on the New Balance website.
It's probably because they're coming out with the V5 soon.
What about Adidas? There's a couple options with Adidas because, Francis, you own a pair of Adidas.
I do
Supershoes,
have a
don't
pair
you?
of Adidas. I have the Adios Pro 4s.
The Pro 4s.
Which were $275, $280. So
okay.
again, you could probably round that up to close to $300.
And that's not even the highest end at Adidas. The Adidas Adizero Adios Pro Evo 1 goes for a staggering $500.
Yeah.
Half a grand.
That's actually crazy. I've seen those shoes. I've held them in my hands. I've never test drove them.
I don't think they let people.
I don't
test
think
drive
they
them.
would let you, which sucks because it's like, how am I supposed to know if they're good?
Asics is currently coming out with a brand new high-end super shoe, but I think they're Metaspeed Ray.
Yeah.
But right now, I think the most expensive Asics shoe that you can get on the market is the Metaspeed Edge Paris for $250. It's a pretty fast shoe. And then Saucony has a super shoe as well. Saucony has the Endorphin Elites.
Yeah, the Endorphin Elites and then the Endorphin Elite V2, which is the most current model.
And the Elite V2, I believe, goes for $285.
Yeah. So why the sticker shock? Again, like anything else, there's a lot of factors that contribute to this. One, research and development. This is a huge one. Companies pour millions and millions of dollars into biomechanics labs, material science, computational fluid dynamics simulations, extensive athlete testing, and countless prototypes. Because what they're doing is pushing the boundaries on what's possible, and that innovation costs money. Think about the teams of scientists, engineers, and designers involved. Those people need to get paid. The other thing is advanced materials. As we've discussed, PEBA foams are not your standard EVA. They're more complex and expensive to produce. Carbon fiber itself is a premium material known for its high strength to weight ratio, but also its higher cost compared to other plastics or textiles.
I mean, there are other shoes have non-carbon fiber plates as well.
This is
I
true.
think Saucony Endorphin Speed 4s, which you have previously endorsed but then have retracted your endorsement.
Yeah.
I think they have a nylon plate.
They have a nylon plate.
Okay.
There's also
cheaper.
the Brooks Ghosts or something.
Okay.
Those have a nylon plate as well.
Okay.
So carbon nylon, the nylon plate is noticeably less springy than the carbon plate, but it does add some rigidity to the shoe itself.
Also, there are some sub-super shoes from other brands that have half carbon plates. Like I know I mentioned the New Balance SC Elites. The SC Trainers, I believe, have a half-length carbon plate. So they still have carbon, but it's less carbon.
The other thing too, when you mention having a carbon plate embedded in the foam, you're introducing manufacturing complexity. So creating these shoes isn't just like creating a cut and sew shoe of yesteryear. Think about this. Precisely embedding a curved carbon plate within a delicate superfoam, ensuring consistent quality and performance, often requires more sophisticated manufacturing processes and tighter tolerances in general. Take a look at the Cloud Boom Strike light spray, which is manufactured by spraying a quick-dry, ultra-thin polymer to a last, or the form of the foot that the shoe is built around. All of this is orchestrated by precision robotics. So they have a robot doing this. The other thing is performance edge and demand. I mean, let's be honest, Brian. There's a performance tax. If a product demonstrably makes athletes faster, companies can and do charge a premium for it. The demand for competitive runners, from elite to age groupers chasing new PBs, the demand is incredibly high.
So the question is, Francis, listening to this podcast makes you, the listener, faster. Should we be charging a performance edge premium for listeners who want to listen to the pod?
It's a good question. I mean,
Probably not, right?
well, I think if people are listening to the podcast on Spotify, like regular Spotify, they might get ads. But if you're listening on Spotify Premium, you're paying for that. So we offer this as a free service.
We do.
To
and
the
there's
community.
platforms you can listen to this on without ads.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, that makes these shoes so expensive, Brian, marketing and endorsements. Think about multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns with sponsored athletes who are quite literally winning in these shoes, like Eliud Kipchoge winning in all Nike gear. That also adds to the overall cost structure that gets passed on to the consumer. So while the price is steep, it reflects the combination of cutting-edge materials, extensive R&D, complex manufacturing, and high demand for a product that promises and often delivers speed. This brings us to the ultimate question, though, Brian. One that every runner ponders when staring at that expensive shoe on the shoe wall or online.
Francis, do these shoes make me faster?
Well, the overwhelming answer from a flood of anecdotal evidence and a growing body of scientific research is yes, for many runners, they do make you faster.
How much faster?
Well, numerous studies often conducted in controlled lab settings have shown improvements in running economy when wearing supershoes compared to traditional racing flats or trainers. And running economy is essentially measured by how much oxygen your body uses to run at a given speed. A lower oxygen cost means you're more efficient. So the most cited figure published by the University of Colorado is around 4% improvement in running economy, though some studies show a range perhaps from 2% to 6% or even more in some individuals with certain shoe models. Now, a 4% improvement in running economy doesn't necessarily mean you'll run 4% faster directly, but it translates into significant physiological advantages. For a 3-hour marathoner, even a 2 to 3% improvement in efficiency could mean shaving off several minutes, the difference between a personal best and just another race. For elite athletes, it's the difference between the podium and being forgotten to history.
And for sub-elite athletes, it's the difference between being forgotten to history and being forgotten to history, but with pride.
But faster.
Yes.
So these shoes make you faster in general, but, and this is a crucial but, it's not a universal magic wand. There's some important caveats. You have individual variability. Not every runner responds the same way. Your unique biomechanics, how your foot strikes the ground, your cadence, your stride length, your body weight, all of that plays a role in how you interact with the shoe. Some runners are high responders and they see significant gains. Others might see more modest improvements. And a small percentage of people might not see any benefit at all, or in very rare cases might even find a particular shoe less economical for them.
So, Francis, this touches on pace dependency, which I think is something we've spoken about in the past. When I first considered splurging to get a pair of carbon-plated shoes, I was apprehensive, feeling like at this speed, is this shoe actually going to help me? Is this shoe actually going to make me faster? And the reality is, I think the design of many super shoes they have aggressive rockers, they have these stiff plates, they're optimized for super fast running. But if you're running at slower speeds, I feel like some runners could find them less effective or even unstable. So, like as you said, Nike develops shoes from the tip of the spear. They maybe didn't necessarily develop an Alpha Fly with a mind towards that 5-hour marathoner.
Yeah, and if the technology isn't being engaged in the way that it was designed, it might not be giving you the return that you think it's going to give you. So that now brings us to another factor, which is durability versus performance. So while the foam offers incredible performance, this PEBA foam is not as durable in terms of maintaining that peak performance compared to more traditional training shoe foams. That pop or responsiveness that's so commonly reported diminishes after a certain number of miles. Some say as few as 100 to 200 miles for peak racing benefits. Though the shoe will still be runnable for longer, it just doesn't have that pop anymore. This shorter peak lifespan adds to the effective cost if you're using them frequently for racing. Take a $275 shoe, you're paying $1.37 per mile for that performance boost, which is crazy to think about when you're running in.
So, Francis, you bought a pair of the Adios Pro 4s. You raced a half marathon in preparation for your marathon, and you raced a marathon in them now. And something that you've been speaking about since the marathon is how you feel, not that the shoe is finished, but that pop that you talked about is gone from the shoe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've raced in it twice.
I've raced in it twice. The pop is gone. That doesn't mean that it's a bad shoe. It's certainly the fastest shoe that I own still, just because of the gap between where my trainers are and where this shoe is. It just doesn't feel as responsive as it did when I took it out of the box the first time.
Wow.
So the other thing that happens with Supershoes is that it alters biomechanics, and this has the risk for injury. These shoes do change the way you run. They can alter joint loading patterns and muscle activation. And while this is really good for efficiency, it might also mean that different parts of your body are working harder or in new ways. There's ongoing discussion and research about whether exclusive or improper use of these shoes could lead to different types of running-related injuries, like shifting stress to the hips, hamstrings, or knees. But most experts recommend that people have an adaptation period and rotating super shoes with other more traditional trainers in their weekly training cycles. They're a tool, so they should be used for specific fast efforts, not necessarily for every single run. And I think it's really interesting. We see a lot of people wearing alpha flies in the wild, as it's called, but I think that's just a generic term for anyone who's casually wearing a super shoe as just like an everyday walking around shoe. It may not be the best tool for the job.
Kate sent me a picture of somebody at the airport the other day who was wearing Vaporflies with their luggage, like to get on the plane. And it's like, maybe you were worried about being late for your flight. You thought you were going to have to run to get there, but I feel like it's probably the improper usage of it.
I think too, what it comes down to is when people see the price tag, they say $275 shoe must be a great shoe. And then they just buy it. And they're right. It is a great shoe, but it's not necessarily a great shoe for walking around. And if you're not running races in it, it's probably not the right thing to be having on your feet.
I think it's important to have that conversation about stress on different parts of the body too. And this is something I think anyone who has tried a new shoe or a different shoe may have found is obviously having a carbon plate or an elite foam is going to change the biomechanics of how you run. That makes sense. But there are other unique things about a specific shoe that are different and affect different people in different ways depending on so many different factors about how you run and how your gait is. And what I've found when I wear a shoe with a different profile than I'm used to, if we talk about adding stack height or adding rocker, or people talk about the drop of shoes, and we can get into this in another episode, but that changes your gait even just a little bit. And you can find that puts stress on your body in new ways, whether that means knee pain, hip pain, working muscles more than they're usually working when you run. Those little changes can make a big difference. Just because a shoe is $300 doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best shoe for you.
Yeah. The other thing too, though, that plays an important role in the performance of these shoes, and maybe this is more of a hand-wavy performance factor, is the psychological factor. Let's not discount this mental boost. So knowing you're wearing the latest technology, the same shoes that pros use, that can provide a significant psychological lift and a boost in confidence, which itself can lead to better performance. They say look great, feel great, run great, right? They say that 80% of a marathon is mental, and that could mean a large improvement in your performance. So we've talked about super shoes. We've talked about the foam. We've talked about the carbon plate. We've talked about whether or not they are actually good for runners. And we've talked about the price tag of super shoes.
We have.
The verdict: super shoes can be a powerful tool for enhancing performance, backed by credible science and countless real-world results. They offer a tangible edge for many, but they are not a substitute for dedicated training, and individual results will vary. They're an investment, and it's worth considering your own running goals, budget, and how your body responds before diving in. So the Supershoe era is undeniably upon us, I would say, Brian.
I mean, now that you're wearing them, I feel like
it's upon me for sure. It's upon you as well.
I don't know if I'd call my Zoom Flies a super shoe. Maybe
I would say
that
they have a carbon plate.
They do have a carbon plate. They do have PEBA foam. I guess that makes them a super shoe.
That's a super shoe.
They're not an elite marathon shoe though.
I mean, they're like a step away from that.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say they're a super shoe.
Okay.
From Roger Bannister's leather spikes, though, think about that, to today's carbon-plated PEBA cushion rockets. These shoes are pushing the boundaries of human speed. They're reshaping personal record books and global record books, and sparking endless debate and excitement in the running world. So what's next? Will we see even more personalized shoe technology? Maybe 3D printed midsoles tailored to an individual's specific biomechanics, or smart materials that adapt in real time? Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure, the race for faster footwear is far from over. So Brian, are you going to go out and buy a pair of super shoes? Another pair of super shoes?
I don't know. That's a good question. So I bought the Nike Zoom Fly for my marathon. I did one long run in them before the marathon. I raced the marathon in them. They are not, I would say, in the category of elite marathon shoe when you talk about the Alpha Fly, or we talk about some of the other shoes we listed before, but they do have a full-length carbon plate. They do have a PEBA foam. They are noticeably faster than the shoes that I run in daily. I don't know. I really think it's a personal choice. I feel like I get super apprehensive when you talk about the price tag on a shoe, and I get really apprehensive when you talk about how much time and how many miles you're going to be able to get out of a pair of shoes. I love putting at least 400 or 500 miles on a pair of shoes, and I feel like something would just sit wrong with me spending that money for a shoe that maybe isn't going to last me that long.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely understand that. I think it makes sense for me to purchase a new pair for a given marathon training cycle, because I feel like in my mind, a marathon, or if I have a really big race coming up and I know that the shoe that I'm wearing is going to be consequential, or if I'm going for a PB, then I feel like it makes sense for me to make that investment. However, like you said, the ephemeral nature of the foam does play a role, and knowing that I'm paying $1.37 per mile is kind of crazy. That's honestly probably more expensive than a blue bike.
They do look cool though.
They look cool, they feel great, and they do make me faster. So again, I feel like it comes down to personal preference. If you want to go out and shell out the cash for a new pair of super shoes every 4 months, you can totally do that. There's no one stopping you, or maybe your bank if you overdraw your account. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's a personal opinion.
Yeah, the financial aspect definitely, I think, is important to consider. I think a theme of a lot of our episodes so far has been the accessibility of running, and something that's so amazing about it is it's a sport that's right out your door. And there's definitely a part of me that feels that this aura of elitism around this elite technology that you don't need, but it's almost a feeling like, oh, you're running a marathon, like what shoes you're running the marathon in. And we're certainly guilty of that. I mean, we ask every guest every week, what shoes do you have on your feet? But this idea that you need to have an elite pair of marathon shoes to go run a marathon is a little bit I don't know if gatekeeping is the right
because
word, but
you have the choice to purchase the shoe or not.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's the herd mentality and the peer pressure of purchasing this shoe. If you go to any sanctioned road race or any like official race, whether it's a 5K, whether it's 10K, whether it's a half marathon, whether it's a marathon, there's going to be, I would say 80% of the field is wearing super shoes.
Yeah. And
it's just a given. And
it's certainly expected that if you want to compete at a high level, you need to wear these shoes now.
Absolutely.
Because everyone else who's competing at a high level is wearing them.
If you want to be competitive, you're going to need these shoes. If you want to give yourself the best shot possible, you're going to get these shoes because they will make you faster.
So, Francis, what shoes do you think you'll wear? We're both running the Philly Marathon this fall. What shoes do you think you're going to wear for Philly?
Adios Pro 4s.
You think we'll get another
100%.
pair?
No blisters. I hit a PB in my marathon. It was my first.
Yeah,
so obviously it was a
like
PB. I think I could hit it.
I also ran a PB in my marathon.
I think I could hit another one in the same shoe. I think I will be more careful with when I wear them though, because even for this marathon, I felt that the responsiveness wasn't quite the same as it was for my half marathon, which I did also PB for and blew my previous best out of the water.
Or how many runs did you wear them for before the marathon?
I think 3.
Okay.
So I did a 7-mile shakeout before my half marathon. I ran my half marathon, and I did 1 speed workout in the shoe before my marathon. And I don't know if it was I wasn't keeping the climate of the shoe correct, or I don't know what happened to it, but I took it out for the marathon, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, it does not feel the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
So running is
a wildly accessible sport.
So many people can run. They have access to it right out their door. Something that I certainly think about from a consumerism standpoint is the effect of buying so many pairs of shoes and the effect of throwing out pairs of shoes, especially if you're only getting to use them for a couple hundred miles. And we don't need to get into all of this, but I feel like I think about the environmental impact of if I buy a brand new pair of shoes and I run in them for 600 miles versus if I buy an elite pair of marathon shoes and you get 150 miles out of them before you're retiring those. I'm getting 4 times the miles.
Yeah.
Out of a non-elite shoe.
Well, think about the time frame too. Like you're wearing the trainers every single day pretty much.
Okay.
Versus the fact that you're only wearing the super shoes once in a while for races. Like they might last the same amount of time in the sense that if your trainers that you're wearing every single day last you 6 months or 4 months, the super shoes might last 6 months or 7 months because you're only pulling them out when you race.
That's true.
And I will also add to that, pretty much every running store that I'm aware of has the option to donate your used running shoes.
What do you think they do with them?
I don't know. I think they specifically ask that the upper not be torn. So I think what they do is either they recycle the materials in the upper and the foam for other shoes, or they donate the shoes themselves to homeless shelters or to people who need shoes.
I'm interested. So I just did a quick Google, and it seems like recycled shoes are typically sorted. They will be cleaned because a shoe will be dirty when you're done using it. And then they'll typically strip it and break it down into its components. And I think earlier you mentioned packing out with a foam. So if your foam is packed out, it could be unusable, but the upper of that shoe or laces of the shoe could still very much be usable when it's donated.
That's a good point. I wonder too if there's a way to like grind down the material of the sole and actually reincorporate it into another foam. Because I've definitely seen shoes that are made with some percentage of recycled materials, which I think is super interesting.
Are you talking about the Nike Grind?
I might be talking about the Nike Grind. I've actually never heard of that.
Nike Grind. With Nike Grind, we're driving towards a more circular future, turning what was once considered waste into new opportunities to create. So it seems like exactly what you're talking about. We'll grind down old foams.
Oh, there you go.
And make materials out of it, whether they're melting it down into new synthetic foams or making... Oh, this is really interesting, actually.
And the other thing, too, that I hadn't thought about until just now is the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be shoes. It could be other components, whether it's like plates for lifting, if you're an Olympic weightlifter, if you're a skateboarder, the wheels of your skateboard. It could be cleats for soccer or football. It could be yoga mats. Did I already mention that? Like you're not necessarily taking a PEBA sole and turning it into another PEBA sole, because that probably wouldn't work. But you could, I guess, downcycle it into another type of shoe that doesn't require as much responsiveness. Because there's plenty of other sports out there. It's not just about running. It's about, football, soccer, track, like weightlifting, skateboarding, snowboarding, skiing, you name it. All of that requires different versions of this material. So if you can transform it into something else, then it has a new life and hopefully lasts a little bit longer.
I feel like that should be our fun fact for this episode, is programs like the Nike Grind use recycled shoes or textiles, foam-based polymers, grind them down, and then you can make, I just looked this up, you can make anything from plates for lifting to grip tape for a skateboard to, here they even have a story about an elementary school's basketball court.
Made out of foam?
Made out of recycled foam.
That is an incredibly fun fact.
That's super fun. That actually makes me feel a little better about buying a single-use shoe.
It makes me want to buy more.
Yeah, you should. Think more people need basketball courts, Francis.
That's true. Thank you all for listening to the Zone 2 podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at the Zone 2 podcast. You can catch new episodes every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.